Most people chase approval by trying harder, speaking louder, or offering more. But influence isn't about pressure, it's about presence. You don't have to push to get a yes. You just have to know how to pull the right emotional strings, quietly, subtly, and powerfully. This book will show you how to master that silent force, how to make people say yes without asking twice. Written and published by Elevate Book. Introduction. There's something magical about hearing someone say yes. It's more than just a word. It's an opening, a door swinging wide, a signal that you've connected with something deep inside them. But how often do we chase that word and miss it completely? We beg, we argue, we explain, we over-explain. And still the answer comes back as a no. Not because we asked the wrong thing, but because we asked the wrong way. This book is not about manipulation. It's not about tricks. It's about resonance. It's about learning how people work at the emotional level, and then using that knowledge with respect, with care, and with extraordinary effect. You don't need to raise your voice to influence. You don't need to be aggressive or overly charming or constantly selling. In fact, when you do those things, you create resistance. But when you learn how to speak to what people already believe, when you learn how to offer what they already want, when you learn to guide their thoughts with stories, silence, and subtle cues, you don't just get a yes, you get it without asking twice. Throughout this book, I'll take you on a cinematic journey through real moments, raw psychology, and deeply human truths. You'll discover why people say yes. You'll learn how to earn their trust before you even speak. And you'll gain the kind of influence that doesn't fade, because it's built on connection, not coercion. If you've ever felt like you were this close to getting the approval, the opportunity, the sale, the chance, but it slipped through your hands, this book will feel like coming home. You'll understand people more clearly. You'll understand yourself more deeply. And you'll walk away with words that don't just work, they resonate. So before we begin, if you're enjoying this journey already, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more stories and insights like this. Chapter 1. The Unseen Power of a Well-Placed Word. You've probably experienced it. A moment when someone said just one sentence, maybe even one word, and everything shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it landed. And in that instant, your answer was yes. Not because you were convinced, not because you were pressured, but because something about the way they said it, something invisible, made it feel right. That's what we're after in this chapter, the invisible art of well-placed words, the kind that don't force agreement, but invite it. Not with shouting, but with gravity. Let's go back to the beginning. A story. A young woman walks into a small bookstore tucked between two tall brick buildings on a rainy street in New York City. She isn't looking for anything. She's just wandering, lost in her thoughts. An old man stands behind the counter, white beard, gentle eyes, quiet hands. He doesn't ask if she needs help. He simply looks at her for a moment, then says softly, "People don't wander in here without looking for something." That's it. One sentence. And it stops her in her tracks. She looks at him like he just read her soul. What was that? A greeting? A guess? A challenge? No, it was influence, disguised as presence. She walks out with 3 books. But it wasn't about the books. It was about feeling seen. That one sentence made her say yes, not to the books, but to the moment, to belonging. Now, think about your life. How often do you try to say more, to explain harder, To sell louder when what people really want is to feel felt. That's the essence of a well-placed word. It doesn't fight for space, it opens space. Let's slow it down and understand the mechanics. Influence begins long before the moment of the ask. It starts with positioning. Think of influence like planting a seed. You don't yell at the ground and demand it to grow. You prepare the soil. You create the right conditions. Well-placed words are seeds, but they only grow when planted in prepared ground. So ask yourself, are you preparing the moment or just pressing for a result? That's why the most powerful influencers don't speak first. They observe, they listen, they feel the emotional climate in the room. Because when they do speak, it lands. It doesn't need to be repeated. It doesn't need to be defended, because it was placed with care. Here's a principle to carry with you. Words don't convince people. Conditions do. Words are the visible part, but conditions, emotional resonance, timing, trust, are the soil. When you say something at the wrong time, even the perfect sentence falls flat. But when you say something at the right time, even the simplest phrase becomes unforgettable. That's the unseen power. Not the cleverness of what you say, but the moment you choose to say it. And that brings us to something essential. The pause. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it. They talk over it. They drown out the moment. But silence is not the enemy of influence. It's the container. Well-placed words live best in silence. A sentence after silence feels like it was earned. It carries more weight. It signals presence. It tells the other person, I'm not here to perform. I'm here to connect. Think of the greatest communicators you've ever seen. They don't rush. They breathe. They look at you, not past you. And when they speak, their words seem to sit on the air. That's not charisma. That's command. And you can learn it. But it starts with slowing down. Because when you slow down, you stop reacting and you start placing. Let me give you an example from a client I once worked with. She was a young executive in a room full of fast-talking, hard-selling alpha personalities. She told me, every time I speak, they talk over me. I feel invisible. So we practice something simple. Don't speak to interrupt. Don't speak to prove. Wait. Observe. And then, when the room breathes, speak just one sentence. Make it a sentence that ends, not trails off. Make it a sentence that lands with intention. The next meeting, she said nothing for the first 20 minutes. Then, as two directors argued over projections, she quietly said, "Can we stop guessing and look at the data that's already telling us the answer?" The room went silent. Heads turned. And one of the VPs actually said, "That's the first useful thing I've heard all day." No pitch, no volume, just precision. That's what we're building here. Not louder voices, but more intentional ones. Words have weight, but only when you stop tossing them around. Only when you place them like stones in still water. The right word, at the right time, in the right tone, can change someone's mind without ever raising your voice. You don't need to beg for yes. You need to speak in a way that makes yes feel safe. Because when people feel safe, they stop resisting. And when resistance disappears, agreement appears. That's the essence of this entire book. And it begins with mastering the unseen power of the well-placed word. Before we move on, pause. Think of a time when someone's words changed you. What made them land? Now think of someone you want to say yes to you. What would change if instead of trying to convince them, you simply began to prepare the soil? Place your words like they matter, because they do. And when you learn that art, you'll never have to ask twice. Chapter 2. Why people say yes and why they don't. Let's start with a truth that will change the way you look at influence forever. People don't say yes because they understand your logic. They say yes because they feel something that makes yes feel safe, rewarding, or necessary. Every decision we make, yes or no, is emotional first, logical second. Let that sink in. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings. We believe we weigh options, consider evidence, and make informed choices. But beneath all that reasoning is something more primal, a whisper that says, "This feels right," or "This doesn't feel safe." And that whisper wins almost every time. So if you want people to say yes to you, you need to speak to that part of them, not the intellect alone, but the part of them that's scanning every moment, asking, will this protect me? Will this reward me? Will this cost me? Because here's the deal. People don't resist you. They resist what they think your requests will cost them. Cost in comfort, cost in identity, cost in control. They say no not because your idea is wrong, but because it threatens something they care about, even if they don't know how to explain it. That's why understanding the why behind yes is everything. Let's break it down. There are only 3 reasons people say yes. 1, they feel safe. Safety is the cornerstone of agreement. If what you're asking feels emotionally or socially risky, the default answer will be no. But if you create emotional safety, if they feel understood, respected, not judged, they'll lean in. 2, they feel seen. People say yes when they feel you truly get them. When your words reflect their inner world, when you make them feel known, not as a number, but as a human. 3, they feel certain. People want to know what's going to happen next. Uncertainty creates hesitation. Certainty creates momentum. So when you're influencing someone, ask yourself, am I making them feel safe? Am I making them feel seen? Am I giving them a sense of certainty? If not, their yes is already drifting away. Let's look at the flip side. Why people say no. They feel overwhelmed. Too many choices, too much pressure, too little time? That's a no. They feel rushed. Pacing matters. People don't want to be cornered. They want to feel like they arrived at the decision themselves. They feel unseen. If they sense you're pushing your agenda without caring about theirs, they'll dig in their heels, no matter how good your idea is. They feel a loss of control. Influence is not about taking power. It's about offering it back. The moment someone feels their autonomy is threatened, they resist, even if they agree with you deep down. And here's something few people understand. Saying no gives people a sense of control. So they say it, just to feel like they're steering the wheel. But if you can preserve their dignity, if you can help them feel in charge, even as you lead the way, you turn resistance into receptivity. Here's a story. A father is trying to get his teenage son to apply for college. He gives him the data, the deadlines, the reasons, the benefits. And the son says, I don't want to talk about this, not because he doesn't understand, but because he feels like the decision isn't his. So one night, instead of repeating the pitch, the father sits beside him, quiet, no pressure, no strategy. He simply says, I remember how scary it was to think about what comes next. I didn't want to make the wrong choice either. And that's it. The next morning, the son prints out an application. Why? Because he felt seen. Because the pressure lifted. Because he wasn't pushed, he was invited. That's real influence. It doesn't corner people. It meets them where they are. So, what do you do when someone resists? You lean into empathy. You slow the pace. You ask more questions than you give answers. You turn the focus from your agenda to their experience. Because when people feel like it's about them, they start to lower their defenses. There's a reason why master negotiators talk less, why the best salespeople ask more than they pitch, why great leaders listen longer before they speak. They know something most people don't. The way to yes is through understanding, not explanation. Let me give you a visual. Imagine every person you want to influence has a vault. Inside that vault is their yes. You can try to pry it open with force, but you'll get resistance, anger, retreat. Or you can listen for the combination, the unique sequence of emotions, needs, and beliefs that unlocks trust. And that combination isn't universal. It's personal. It requires curiosity. Here's the irony. Most people are trying to change others without ever taking the time to understand them. But influence is not about changing minds. It's about revealing alignment. People don't want to be convinced. They want to be understood. Because once they feel understood, they'll often talk themselves into yes. Let's revisit the 3 keys: safety, connection, certainty. Every conversation, every pitch, every request should answer 3 silent questions. Do I feel safe doing this? Do I feel like this person gets me? Do I know what will happen if I say yes? If the answer is yes to all 3, they'll say yes to you. And you won't have to beg. You won't have to repeat. You won't have to fight. You'll simply unlock something already waiting to be said. So before we move on, think about the last time someone said no to you. Was it really a no to your idea? Or was it a no to how they felt in the moment? What would change if you started paying more attention to the person than the pitch? If you want to make people say yes without asking twice, you have to stop chasing their answer and start listening to their fears. Because once you soothe those, the yes will come looking for you. Chapter 3. The First Yes, How Trust Begins Without Words. Before anyone says yes to your request, they say yes to you. Long before you pitch an idea, ask for a favor, offer a suggestion, or share a vision, a silent decision is made. It's the first yes. The yes that happens before you open your mouth, before you explain anything, before any facts are exchanged. And it sounds like this: do I trust this person? Most of the time, people are not evaluating your logic. They're scanning you for one thing: can I relax around you? Because trust doesn't start with facts, it starts with feelings. The moment someone feels you're safe, sincere, and not self-serving, they begin to lean in, even if they don't understand what you're offering yet. They don't say yes to your words, they say yes to your presence. And that kind of yes, it happens without a single word. Let's go deeper. You walk into a room. Someone across the table looks at you for just a few seconds, and something happens. They shift in their chair. They raise their eyebrows. Their posture opens. It's small, but it matters. That's the first yes. It's the yes of acceptance, of willingness, of trust being born. But it can also go the other way. They glance and withdraw. They cross their arms. Their smile tightens. They say silently, I don't know about this one. You haven't said a word, but the decision is already being made. So what influences that silent decision? It's not about being perfect. It's about being perceived as present, aligned, and emotionally safe. Here are the 3 pillars of unspoken trust. 1. Congruence. People trust what feels aligned. If your words, body, and energy don't match, people sense it. You say, I'm excited to be here, but your tone is flat. You say, I care, but you keep checking your phone. They don't trust what you say. They trust what feels real. Congruence creates credibility without credentials. 2. Warmth before competence. People don't care how smart you are until they feel that you care. Warmth opens the door. Competence walks in after. Many people lead with expertise, but expertise without empathy feels cold. Lead with warmth, and people will want to hear your expertise. 3. Presence over performance. You don't need to impress people. You need to be with them. Not rehearsing your next sentence, not trying to win. People feel seen. And when people feel seen, they relax. That's the first yes. Here's a story. There was a therapist named Carl. He was known across the country, not because he was the most skilled, but because of how people felt in his presence. He barely spoke in sessions, but patients said they felt more understood in 1 hour with him than in years of talking to others. Why? Because he listened with his whole self. He leaned in. He didn't rush. He didn't interrupt. He didn't stare blankly. He mirrored feeling without forcing advice. And that presence made people trust him without needing to be convinced. That's the first yes in action. There's a quiet confidence that builds when you know you don't need to chase trust. When you realize that people don't say yes to pressure, they say yes to peace. They say yes to people who don't need to dominate the space, but hold it. They say yes to people who don't posture to be liked, but stand still in who they are. You don't need to be louder. You need to be clearer in your presence. Because when someone feels, I know who you are, they don't just listen, they follow. So how do you create that first yes? Here are 3 things you can do without speaking. A. Lead with stillness. The world is noisy. When you show up calm, centered, and steady, you instantly stand out. Stillness doesn't mean silence. It means you're not chasing energy. You anchor it. Stillness says, I'm here. I'm whole. I'm not trying to take anything from you. That's magnetic. B. Be the mirror, not the spotlight. Instead of stepping in to be seen, step in to see. People open up when they feel reflected. Smile when they smile. Lower your voice when they lean in. Match their rhythm, not their volume. Mirroring builds trust without force. C. Let your eyes speak first. You can tell when someone is scanning the room versus truly with you. When you meet someone's eyes with warmth, not evaluation, with curiosity, not calculation, you invite them to let down their guard. And when the guard drops, the real conversation begins. The mistake most people make is trying to get the yes before earning the person. You ask for the sale, you pitch the idea, you push for the answer, and you skip the first yes. I trust you. If you want someone to say yes without hesitation, you must become someone whose presence answers their fear. Fear of judgment, fear of pressure, fear of being manipulated. Your job isn't to get the yes. It's to become the person they want to say yes to. And that has nothing to do with clever words, and everything to do with how safe they feel in your company. So the next time you walk into a room, pause, not to prepare your pitch, but to tune into the space, to feel the energy, to center yourself. Don't perform, just arrive. Let your presence speak louder than your words. Let your energy say what your mouth can't. Because when you carry warmth, congruence, and stillness, you make the first yes easy. And once that first yes is given, the second one is already on its way. Chapter 4. Reading people before they speak. You walk into a room. 3 people look your way. One smiles politely, another swats your gaze. The third holds your eye a second longer than expected. And instantly, before anyone has said a word, you feel something, an energy, a shift, a sense. That's not imagination, it's perception. It's your brain doing what it's been wired to do for centuries, reading people. Before we ever spoke in words, we communicated in glances, gestures, breathing patterns, and silence. Language came late, instinct came first. Which means this: if you want to influence anyone, without pushing, without repeating, without resistance, you need to master what they're telling you before they speak. Because every person is broadcasting signals. Most of us just aren't tuned in. Let's pause here and ask a simple question. What if the key to influence isn't in what you say, but in what you sense? What if the most persuasive people on earth aren't the best talkers, but the best readers of others? When you know how to read someone's state, you gain access to their inner world before they even let you in. And once you understand someone's inner world, you stop making noise and start creating resonance. Here's the truth no one talks about. Most people don't listen to you. They listen to how they feel around you. And how they feel is shaped by your ability to tune into them. Let me tell you about someone I once coached. A negotiator for high-stakes peace talks. He told me the secret wasn't in the data or arguments. It wasn't in the political leverage. It wasn't even in the language. It was in watching the breath. Before someone changes their mind, he said, they change their breathing. Faster, slower, shallow, deep. He watched for the shift. Once I saw their body relax, he told me, I knew their mind would follow. That's not strategy. That's sensitivity. And that is what turns quiet people into unforgettable influencers. So, how do you do it? How do you read someone before they speak? Start with this. 1. Watch the eyes, not the mouth. Most people focus on words, but the eyes tell the truth first. Dilated pupils, heightened interest or emotional arousal. Squinting or glancing sideways, uncertainty, discomfort, or calculation. The eyes are windows, but only if you stop talking long enough to see. 2. Listen for the emotional tone beneath the words. People say things they don't believe, but they feel things they can't hide. Pay attention to how they say it. Flat tone? Maybe they're guarded. Rapid speech? Maybe they're nervous. Long pause before answering? They're calculating or uncertain. You don't need to confront them. Just register it, because now you have a map. 3. Look for micro-reactions. These are the flashes. The second-long expressions they don't mean to show. They say, I'm fine, but their face twitches, their lip curls, their hand flexes, their shoulder lifts slightly before settling. That's not noise. That's the truth leaking out. You're not reading minds, you're reading bodies, and bodies rarely lie. Reading people isn't about judgment, it's about attunement. When you learn how to read someone's nonverbal cues, you can adjust your energy, your pace, your presence before resistance shows up. And that's the difference between pushing and pulling, between fighting for yes and letting yes come to you. Let's go deeper. There's a concept called emotional mirroring. It's what babies do before they learn language. They mirror facial expressions, sounds, body rhythms, and in doing so, they form connection without a single word. Adults do it too, but we've learned to ignore it. Want to create instant alignment with someone? Mirror their pace. If they speak slowly, don't rush. If they lean back, give them space. If they pause often, match that rhythm. You're not mimicking, you're syncing. and synced people trust each other. It's biology. It's ancient. And it works. Here's something else. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Just notice. Let them speak first. Let their body language shape your opening. We're so trained to take the lead, to be confident, to jump in, to control the moment. But real power walks into the room and waits. Real influence starts with listening so deeply that the other person feels it in their chest. You're not trying to change me, you're trying to understand me. That's rare. That's trust. And that's where yes is born. A quick story. A woman was trying to convince her mother to move into assisted living. Logic wasn't working. Fear, resistance, silence. So she stopped arguing. She sat down beside her and watched. Her mother kept touching a photo of her old kitchen, again and again. And then it clicked. This wasn't about health. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about independence. It was about memory, about control, about identity. So instead of saying, "Mom, this is what's best for you," she said, "I found a place that reminds me of your kitchen." Her mother looked up. Tears welled. She nodded. One sentence, but first, hours of watching, of sensing, of seeing. You don't get to that kind of yes with facts. You get there with feeling. So here's your quiet superpower. Read first, respond later. Because the person who sees deepest wins deepest trust. The person who listens without needing to interrupt is the one people confide in. And the one who sees what others miss becomes unforgettable. Before we continue, if this chapter spoke to something deep inside you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to my channel to keep this journey going. There's so much more I want to share with you. Now, let's keep going. Chapter 5. The Invisible Language of Confidence. Confidence is quiet. You don't always see it coming. It doesn't strut into the room or raise its voice. It doesn't puff up or push forward. Real confidence is still, unshaken. Like deep water, calm on the surface, powerful underneath. And here's what most people miss. You don't need to say anything to project confidence, because the most powerful kind is invisible. It's in how you carry yourself. It's in what you don't say, your presence, your ability to stay grounded while others scramble. Confidence is the language that speaks before you do, and keeps speaking, even after you've gone silent. Have you ever met someone and felt instantly reassured? They didn't have to prove themselves. They didn't over-explain. They didn't rush to fill every silence. They were just there. And their energy said, "I'm not here to convince you. I already belong." That is influence without force. And it starts with understanding how invisible confidence works. Let's begin with a truth most people ignore. People don't follow the loudest voice in the room. They follow the most certain. Not the smartest, not the flashiest, not even the most charismatic. The most certain. Because certainty feels like safety. And remember, safety is the foundation of yes. So how do you speak the invisible language of confidence? You don't need to fake it. You don't need to act like someone else. You just need to anchor yourself. Let me show you how. 1. Confidence begins in the body. Your body tells the truth long before your mouth does. If you want to influence someone without speaking twice, you must first influence your own state. Straight spine, relaxed shoulders, steady hands, slow breath. These are not just posture tips, they're psychological anchors. When your body is grounded, your presence becomes magnetic. People sense it. They feel drawn to it because it signals strength without threat. Try this. Before your next difficult conversation, don't rehearse your script. Stand still, breathe deeply, Center your weight in your feet. Let stillness be your preparation. Then walk in, not to dominate, but to anchor the space. 2. Speak less, mean more. Insecure people ramble. They overclarify. They seek validation with every sentence. But confident communicators don't need to flood the space with words. They know the weight of silence. They trust the pause. They understand this truth. The less you speak, the more people listen. Because when you speak sparingly, every word gets its own space. And when your words have space, they gain impact. Say what matters, then stop. Let it land. And if someone challenges you, don't fill the silence trying to defend yourself. Just breathe. Hold your ground. Let them feel your steadiness. That's more persuasive than any argument. 3. Drop the need to be liked. This is the hardest one, because we've all been trained to seek approval. But invisible confidence doesn't chase applause. It stands in truth, without needing permission. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to be distant. You just have to stop shaping yourself to avoid rejection. Because here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be liked is the moment people start respecting you. People trust those who don't flinch, who don't beg, who don't bend at the first sign of disapproval. Confidence isn't about being right. It's about being rooted. And rooted people are rare. That's why they get yes without asking twice. Let me tell you a story. A young woman, Maria, was pitching her idea at a startup competition. Her competitors brought slides, charts, elaborate handouts. Maria brought one thing: a clear voice. She didn't pace. She didn't gesture wildly. She stood still, calm, focused. And in under 5 minutes, she said exactly what needed to be said, then thanked the room and stepped down. No overkill, no panic, just clarity. She didn't win the loudest applause, but after the event, 3 investors walked straight to her. "You were the only one who seemed like a founder," one said. Why? Not because her idea was better, because she was steady. They trusted her energy. They believed in her presence. She radiated calm certainty. And that's what people follow. 4. Let go of control and gain it. This might surprise you, but confident people don't try to control others. They don't force outcomes. They know this. Control is an illusion, but composure is a choice. When someone says no, they don't panic. When things go off track, they don't crumble. Because their influence isn't tied to the outcome. It's rooted in their identity. They know who they are, and that knowing shapes how others respond. People don't say yes to chaos. They say yes to consistency. So if you want to be more influential, stop trying to force control. Be the stable point in a spinning world. Be the calm in the storm. Be the one who doesn't flinch when others do. That's the language of confidence, and it's heard without being spoken. So ask yourself, do people feel steadier after talking to you? Do you radiate calm or chase approval? Do your words land because they're grounded or because they're loud? Confidence isn't something you earn later. It's something you choose now. And the moment you embody it, your voice starts speaking before your lips move. Let's close with this. The most magnetic people are not the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who know who they are and carry that truth in every step, every word, every breath. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be anchored. Because when you are, people say yes to your energy long before they say yes to your words. Chapter 6. Framing reality to work in your favor. People don't see the world as it is. They see it through the frames they've learned to use. Frames shape perception, and perception shapes decisions. That means the way you present reality matters just as much, if not more, than the reality itself. You can show someone the exact same situation, but change the frame and you change the meaning. You change the yes. That's the power of framing. And when you understand it, you never have to push for agreement again. You simply guide people to see differently. And once they see differently, they decide differently. Let me start with a story. A doctor walks into the room with two different patients. To the first patient, she says, "This procedure has a 90% success rate." To the second, she says, "There's a 10% chance of failure." Same procedure, same odds, very different emotional reactions. The first patient agrees immediately. The second hesitates. Why? Because the frame changed, and with it, the feeling. That's the key. Feelings drive decisions. Frames shape feelings. So if you can shape the frame, you shape the yes. Let's make this personal. You're pitching an idea. You say, "This will cost $10,000. That's a price frame. But what if you said, "This investment is designed to save you $25,000 over the next year"? That's a value frame. One creates tension. The other creates potential. It's not manipulation. It's context. It's clarity. It's seeing the same mountain from a more hopeful side. There are three master frames that great influencers use to turn resistance into agreement. Let's walk through them. 1. The opportunity frame. People don't want more responsibility. They want more possibility. So don't present the burden, present the benefit. Instead of saying, "This new role means longer hours," say, "This role opens doors that most people wait years to walk through." Instead of, "You need to fix these issues," try, "You're the one person I trust to elevate this to the next level." You've changed nothing except the angle, and that changes everything. 2. The ownership frame. People say yes when they feel ownership of the idea, when it feels like theirs, not yours. So instead of telling them what to do, ask questions that lead them to it. Instead of saying, "You should take this path," ask, "What path feels most aligned with who you want to become?" Ownership is influence, because we fight other people's ideas, but we defend our own. If you want someone to agree, help them feel like they discovered the decision themselves. That's not manipulation. That's respectful guidance. 3. The identity frame. This one is the most powerful. People don't act based on logic. They act based on who they believe they are. So if your message threatens their identity, you'll hit a wall. But if your message affirms their identity, you'll open a door. Let's say you're asking someone to step up as a leader. Don't say, "You need to start managing people." Say, "You've always had the ability to inspire others. This is just the next evolution of who you already are." See the shift? You're not telling them to change. You're inviting them to step deeper into who they want to be. That's the identity frame. And it's how you make people say yes without resistance, because you're not confronting them. You're confirming them. Let's bring it together. Framing isn't about deception. It's about direction. You're not changing the facts. You're guiding the focus. And focus is what turns confusion into clarity, resistance into willingness, hesitation into yes. When someone says no, don't argue the content. Reframe the context. Here's an example from a father and daughter. The daughter didn't want to go to school. She said it was boring, useless. The father didn't scold her. He didn't argue about grades. Instead, he asked, "What's the one thing you wish the world understood about you?" She paused, thought, answered. Then he said, That's what education is for. To give you more ways to show them. She got up the next day on her own. No argument, no lecture. Just a shift in frame, a shift in meaning, a shift in why. Now, take a moment and reflect. What yes are you trying to earn right now? What frame are you using? Does that frame create pressure or potential? Does it reflect your needs or their identity? If your message isn't landing, it's not always the message, it's the frame. And once you shift that, you stop chasing the yes. The yes starts finding you. Chapter 7. How to ask without actually asking. There's a kind of magic in being able to lead someone to a decision without ever saying the words out loud. You've probably seen it. The mentor who doesn't give advice, just tells a story. The friend who nudges you toward clarity by asking one perfect question. The leader who never says, "Do this," but somehow everyone follows anyway. That's the art of asking without asking. And when you master it, people start saying yes, not because you asked them, but because they decided to. That's real influence. That's emotional leadership. And it's what separates people who force decisions from those who guide them. A young manager wanted her team to take ownership of a broken process. She could have given instructions, laid out deadlines, assigned tasks. Instead, she asked her team, "What's one thing about this process that frustrates you the most?" They answered, passionately. Then she asked, "If we fix that one thing, how would that change your day?" They leaned in. By the end of the meeting, the team wasn't just on board, they were driving the changes. Not one command had been given, not one directive. Just questions, just permission to care, just space to choose. That's how you ask without asking. You start inviting. Here's the deeper truth. People are more likely to say yes to an idea they feel they've discovered themselves, not one that was handed to them, not one that was forced upon them. So if you want someone to agree with you, don't sell the answer. Sell the discovery. Let them walk into it. Let them own it. Let them feel like it came from within. Because when they do, the yes becomes theirs. So how do you do it? How do you lead someone toward a yes without actually saying, "I need you to say yes"? Let's look at the tools of the subtle persuader. 1. Ask questions that create ownership. The right question can do more than a 5-minute pitch. Not, "Will you do this?" but, "What do you think would make this work?" Not, "Can I count on you?" but, "What would it take for this to feel like the right step for you?" The moment you ask someone to participate in the solution, they stop feeling pushed and start feeling powerful. Because it's no longer your idea, it's our idea. And that shifts everything. You don't have to command. You can suggest a path, gently, clearly. Instead of, "You need to act," try, "Most people in your position have found that taking action early saved them time and stress later." Instead, if you were to reach out first, how do you think that might shift the tone? This is soft power. It's elegant, it's respectful, and it works. Because you're not pushing an action, you're normalizing it. 3. Create emotional contrast. People don't just move toward pleasure, they move away from pain. So without being manipulative, you can gently highlight the difference between two emotional realities. What staying stuck looks like. What movement could feel like. Say you're trying to get someone to commit to a healthier lifestyle. You could say, "If nothing changes, what do you think next year might look like?" Let the silence do the work. Let the imagination draw the contrast. Then say, "And if something did change, what kind of energy would you love to have by then?" This isn't about pressure, it's about possibility. You've helped them stand between two futures, and the path forward becomes obvious, without you needing to point. 4. Let silence carry the weight. This one is often forgotten, but sometimes you don't need to say anything at all. When you've made your invitation, when the moment is right, just stop. Don't explain further, don't oversell, don't break the silence. Let it breathe. Let them feel the decision inside their body, because silence is space. And in space, people hear themselves more clearly. And if your energy is calm, trusting, and patient, they'll lean toward you. Because you're not trying to control them, you're letting them choose you. That's powerful and rare. Let me give you another example. A woman wanted her partner to attend couples therapy. Every time she asked directly, it turned into a fight. So one day, she tried something different. She said, "I realized I miss how we used to talk. Remember how we just sit in the car and stay parked for an hour? I want to find our way back to that." Then she stopped. No blame, no suggestion, no command. A few days later, her partner said, "I found a counselor who does evening sessions. Want to check them out together?" She didn't ask. She evoked the desire. She created emotional gravity. And he moved. That's what this chapter is about. Creating gravity. Not by demanding, not by pleading, but by speaking into what people already want and giving them room to claim it. Before we close, reflect on this. What's something you've been asking for lately? Directly, clearly, repeatedly. What if you stopped asking and started inviting? What if you used questions instead of commands, silence instead of pressure, story instead of instruction? Asking without asking is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's trust. It's confidence. It's knowing that when you stop pushing, you give people space to move toward you willingly. And that kind of yes, you never have to ask twice. Chapter 8. The Mirror Effect. Getting people to agree with themselves. Most people think influence is about getting someone to agree with you, but the real secret is this. People don't say yes to you. They say yes to themselves, to what they already believe, to what already aligns with their values, identity, emotions. If you try to force your opinion onto theirs, they resist. But if you reflect their own thoughts, if you help them hear themselves clearly, they lean in, they nod, they say yes. Not because you convince them, but because they recognize themselves in your words. That's the mirror effect. And when you master it, you stop persuading. You start resonating. Let's break this down. There's a deep psychological truth at the core of all human behavior. People want to stay consistent with who they believe they are. That's identity. And identity is the strongest driver of decision-making. So when someone says yes, it's not because you made a perfect argument, it's because the decision felt like an extension of who they are. They're not agreeing with your idea. They're agreeing with their reflection in your idea. If you can hold up that reflection, you can make people say yes, without pushing, without repeating, without force. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. A teacher is struggling to get a student to participate in class. Every day she encourages him. Every day he shrinks back. Until one afternoon, she says, "You know, the quiet ones usually notice the things no one else does. That's a strength, not a flaw." The student looks up. Something shifts. The next day, he speaks. Just one sentence, but it's more than he's ever said. Why? Because he wasn't being called out. He was being called up. She held up a mirror, and he saw strength instead of silence, capability instead of awkwardness. That's the mirror effect in action. So how do you use this in your own life? How do you help people agree with themselves so they say yes to you? Let's walk through 3 steps. 1. Reflect their values back to them. Everyone wants to feel aligned with their own values. If you know what someone stands for, freedom, family, growth, creativity, you can frame your message to match it. Let's say you're asking someone to invest in a new project. Instead of saying, "This will be profitable," say, "This reflects the innovative spirit you always fight for." Or instead of, "We should act fast," say, "Your commitment to staying ahead of the curve, this is exactly that." You're not bending the truth. You're connecting the dots. You're holding up a mirror to what already matters to them. And when they see themselves in the message, they say yes with confidence. 2. Echo their language. There's no faster way to build rapport than to speak someone's emotional dialect. If they say, "I just want more peace in my life," you don't respond with, "This will increase productivity." You respond with, "This might be the path to the peace you've been looking for." When you mirror someone's words, genuinely, respectfully, you tell them, "I see you, I hear you, I'm not trying to change you, I'm walking with you." And people follow those who walk with them. 3. Let them hear their own wisdom. Sometimes the most powerful influence tool isn't advice, it's reflection. Someone tells you their problem. You don't jump in to fix it. You say, "It sounds like you already know what matters most to you. Want to talk more about that?" Or, "What you just said, that felt important. Say it again." Now they're not just thinking, they're hearing themselves. And in that echo, their truth becomes clear. Decisions become easy. They say yes because you help them remember who they are. Let me share a story. A young man was hesitant about proposing to his girlfriend. Not because he didn't love her, but because he was afraid of being too young or not ready enough. His older brother didn't tell him what to do, didn't give a lecture. He said, "You've always been someone who leans into love, even when it scares you. That's what I've always admired about you." Silence. The young man looked down, then smiled. "I guess I have, haven't I?" A week later, he proposed, not because someone gave him permission, but because someone handed him a mirror, and he remembered who he was. That's what this chapter is all about, helping people see themselves clearly so they can move forward confidently. You don't need to be louder. You need to be more aligned. You don't need to win arguments. You need to hold mirrors. Because when someone sees their strength in your words, they don't just say yes, they say, "This feels like me." And that is the most powerful yes of all. Before we continue, if this is resonating with you, take a second to subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's so much more waiting for you there. Deeper stories, real-world tools, and a place where we grow together. Ready to keep going? Chapter 9. The Rule of Reciprocity Without Giving Too Much. There's a simple truth buried deep in the human heart. When someone gives to us, we feel compelled to give something back. It's ancient, it's emotional, and it's universal. It's called the Rule of Reciprocity, and it governs far more of our daily behavior than we realize. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think giving more means getting more, that the path to influence is paved with favors, freebies, and endless generosity. So they overgive, they overpromise, they give until they're empty, and still hear no. But reciprocity isn't about giving too much. It's about giving right, with intention, with clarity, and with emotional precision. Because when you give strategically, you awaken a deeply human instinct, not to repay, but to connect. Let's begin with this. We are wired to balance emotional accounts. When someone does something kind for us, no matter how small, we feel a tug inside to return the gesture, to restore balance, to keep the unspoken agreement of fairness intact. We don't always say it out loud, but we think it. They did something for me, Now I want to respond. That's reciprocity. And it runs through every culture, every community, every relationship. But here's the danger. If your giving feels manipulative, if it feels like a transaction, a trap, a setup, the rule breaks. The magic disappears. And instead of gratitude, you create suspicion. So the question becomes, how do you give just enough to awaken connection without making people feel indebted, cornered, or obligated? Let's explore. 1. Give to empower, not impress. There's a big difference between giving to impress someone and giving to elevate them. When you give to impress, it centers you. Look how generous I am. Look how much I care. When you give to empower, it centers them. I see your potential. I believe in you. I want to support that. One creates pressure. The other creates permission. So instead of trying to prove your worth through gifts, advice, or time, look for ways to create small moments of elevation. A compliment that feels deeply personal, an insight that helps someone see themselves differently, a tool, a connection, a step that unlocks their next move. Those gifts don't cost much, but they carry weight. Because they're not about you giving, they're about them growing. And that is the kind of generosity people say yes to. 2. Make it feel personal, not promotional. We've all seen it. The free offer with a catch, the fake compliment tied to a pitch, the favor that comes with a hidden invoice. That's not reciprocity. That's a transaction in disguise, and people can smell it. But when your gift feels personal, unexpected, unbranded, unrequested, it breaks down resistance. It says, I'm not doing this to trap you. I'm doing this because I care. That's rare, that's memorable, and that's influential. So ask yourself, what's one thoughtful gesture I can offer that speaks to this person's real life? Not a script, not a bribe, a real gesture, from human to human. It might be as small as sending an article that reminded you of something they said, or asking a question no one else has cared enough to ask, or remembering a tiny detail they thought you'd forget. That's generosity without ego. And that's 3. Give the gift of belief. This might be the most powerful form of reciprocity. It's not material, it's emotional. When you believe in someone, when you speak to the best in them, before they even see it themselves, you give them something they didn't even know they were missing. Permission. To try, to change, to become. And people will move mountains for those who first believed in them. You don't have to say much. Sometimes all it takes is, you don't see it yet, but I do. You're ready. That gift echoes for years, and what it awakens can never be bought. Here's a story. A young man applied for a job he didn't think he deserved. Imposter syndrome, doubt, fear. The interviewer looked at his resume and said, everyone else here listed what they've done. You listed what you've learned. That tells me you're going to grow faster than all of them. No offer was made, no promise, just belief. The young man left that interview and said yes to himself for the first time in years. That one sentence was a gift, and it changed the course of his life. That's the reciprocity that matters, the kind that doesn't wait for payback, because the transformation is the return. 4. Know when to stop giving. Yes, stop. Because if you give too much, if your giving crosses the line from generous to excessive, you create imbalance. And imbalance leads to resentment on both sides. They feel overwhelmed, unworthy, or suspicious. You feel drained, underappreciated, or used. True reciprocity respects boundaries. So if someone consistently receives but never responds, if your giving is met with indifference, If you feel like you're proving instead of connecting, pause. Pull back with grace. Give space, not guilt. And remember, the right people respond to generosity with presence, not payment. And presence is all you need. Let's bring it home. Reciprocity isn't about buying love. It's about offering light, a moment, a gesture, a belief, and letting that light move forward, echoing into someone's choices, their confidence, their yes. You don't need to give more. You just need to give what matters. Because when your giving is sincere, subtle, and personal, people remember. They respond. And often, they say yes, not because they owe you, but because they trust you. And that is influence in its purest form. Chapter 10. Emotion always wins, triggering the right response. We like to think we're rational, that people make decisions based on facts, evidence, logic. That if we just say the right thing the right way, clearly, reasonably, convincingly, they'll say yes. But here's the unspoken truth about human behavior. Logic may justify the decision, but emotion always wins. Always. It's the feeling, not the data, that decides. The pulse, the gut, the silent whisper, this feels right. So if you want people to say yes without pressure or persuasion, you don't need a stronger argument. You need a deeper feeling. Because when people feel it, they don't need to be convinced. Let's start with this question. What makes someone say yes in the first place? It's not just agreement. It's alignment. And alignment doesn't happen in the body. That moment when someone leans in, when their voice softens, when their face relaxes, when their eyes shift from scanning to seeing, that's when yes is forming. And it's forming not because they've calculated the pros and cons, but because something feels right. Your words landed in their emotional core. They saw themselves in the story. They felt safe. They felt understood. They felt moved. That's what creates agreement. Emotion isn't a tool, it's the bridge. Let's look at 3 emotional triggers that move people to yes. Not tricks, not gimmicks, real human experiences that open the heart before the head gets in the way. 1. Belonging. Every person carries a deep, unspoken need to belong, to be accepted, to feel part of something that matters. When you speak in a way that signals inclusion, when your energy says, you're already part of this, people move closer. So instead of saying, I want to convince you, say, I think you've always believed this. I'm just putting words to it. That's not persuasion, that's recognition. And recognition feels like coming home. 2. Relief. In a world of noise, pressure, and endless demand, one of the most powerful emotional triggers is relief. People don't want more to do. So if your message gives someone permission to breathe, to drop their guard, to stop pretending, you've given them a gift. Say things like, you're not crazy for feeling this way. It's okay to not have the answer yet. You've already come farther than you think. Those phrases don't sell, they soothe. And when people feel soothed, they stop resisting. They start listening, and they say yes, because you met them in the storm, not just at the finish line. 3. Inspiration. We don't change for facts, we change for vision. Inspiration is the moment someone sees a future version of themselves and believes it's possible. So when you want to move someone to yes, don't just talk about the benefits. Paint the feeling of what life could be like. Not, this will increase your productivity, but imagine waking up without that knot in your chest. Not, "This will make your business grow," but, "Picture walking into a room and knowing you built this." You're not selling a product, you're offering a possibility, and possibility is emotional currency. Let me tell you a story. A mother couldn't get her son to apply to college. He shut down every time she brought it up. So one day, she stopped talking about forms and deadlines, and instead, she said, "I saw a photo the other day of a campus that reminded me of you. There was this tree with books under it, and I just pictured you there, reading, thinking, becoming." He didn't speak, but the next week he asked her to drive him to a college fair. Not because of the information, but because of the image. She gave him something to feel, and that feeling pulled him forward. Emotion isn't noise, it's navigation. When someone feels safe, connected, inspired, their body opens, their heart opens, and the answer becomes clear. You didn't force it, you revealed it. That's the beauty of emotional influence. It doesn't chase the yes. It creates the conditions where yes is the natural response. So, how do you build emotional resonance in your everyday conversations? Start with these simple shifts. Speak in stories, not stats. Say, "I feel" more than "I think." Use metaphors that make people see themselves. Slow your pace when you speak from the heart. Breathe before you deliver the sentence that matters most. Because how you say something feels more than what you say. Here's the final truth of this chapter. Emotion leads, logic follows. If you speak only to the head, you'll always have to work harder. But if you speak first to the heart, the head finds reasons to agree. So don't be afraid to make someone feel. Feelings are not weakness. They're direction. They're the first light on the path to yes. Chapter 11. Silence, Space, and Saying Less. We live in a world that worships volume. Say more, explain harder, talk faster, fill the air. But in the quiet, something more powerful lives, something deeper, something people trust before they even realize it. Silence isn't empty, it's full of presence, and presence speaks louder than any words ever could. If you want to make someone say yes without asking twice, you must learn how to use not just your words, but your pauses. Because when you say less, what you do say lands harder. Let's begin with this truth. Most people are afraid of silence. They think silence means something's gone wrong, that the message didn't hit, that the moment is awkward. So they rush in. They explain more. They repeat themselves. They dilute the power of their own message. But the best communicators, they know silence is not a gap to be filled. It's a doorway to be honored. Think of the last time someone said something that gave you chills. It wasn't just the words, it was the pause after, the stillness, the space that let it sink in. Words without space are noise. Words with space become impact. Let me show you how silence builds influence. 1. Silence signals confidence. Insecure people talk too much. They're afraid if they stop speaking, they'll lose control of the moment. But confident people, they let silence do the work. They pause before answering. They pause after speaking. They let the room catch up. That tells people, I trust what I just said. I don't need to dress it up. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to connect with you. And connection doesn't need clutter. It needs clarity. 2. Space creates emotional room. When you're trying to move someone emotionally, whether to action, agreement, or empathy, you must leave space for them to feel. Don't rush from one idea to the next. Say the thing that matters most, And then stop. Let the silence breathe. Let the feeling settle. Let the listener fill the space with their own reflection. That's when transformation happens. Not during your speech, but during their pause. Here's a story. A business coach met with a high-achieving client. The client was anxious, overwhelmed, running on fumes. She rattled off her concerns, deadlines, expectations, pressure, control. When she finally stopped, the coach didn't speak. Not immediately. He just looked at her, present, steady, silent. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. She began to cry. "I just needed someone to stop talking," she whispered. "I haven't had quiet in weeks." He didn't give her advice. He gave her something rarer, space. And in that space, she found the clarity she was chasing. 3. Saying less makes you more memorable. People don't remember monologues. They remember moments. That one phrase, that one line, that one moment of presence that pierced the noise. If you want people to remember your message, don't bury it in paragraphs. Cut through. Save a thing. Then let silence hold it like a spotlight. You're not performing, you're placing. Place your words like precious stones, not scattered gravel. 4. Less explanation equals more impact. The more you explain, the more people doubt. Because over-explaining signals insecurity, and insecurity triggers resistance. But when you speak clearly, briefly, calmly, you give people something rare. Let's say you're sharing a difficult truth. Don't ramble. Don't hedge. Don't soften it to the point of confusion. Say it. Own it. Let the silence do what your scrambling can't. The strongest leaders speak in complete ideas. Then they stop, and their words echo. Let's explore a real-world example. 2 salespeople, same product, same pitch deck. The first one talks for 40 minutes straight, answers questions before they're asked, explains every possible scenario, floods the air with reassurance. The second one presents for 10 minutes, listens for 30, asks a question, waits for a real answer, says, "I think that this could be a great fit based on what you've shared." Then pauses. Guess who closes more deals? The one who gave people space to speak, to think, to feel ownership of the decision. People don't say yes because of the volume of your words. They say yes because of the resonance of your presence. Before we close, let me offer you this. Influence doesn't come from how much you say. It comes from how deeply what you say is felt. So use your silence like a sculptor uses negative space. Let your stillness communicate power. Because sometimes the most compelling voice in the room is the one that waits, the one that listens, the one that speaks with gravity, not volume. So next time you're tempted to talk more, pause. Let them think. Let them feel. Let your presence speak louder than your pitch. Because in a world that never stops talking, the person who knows when to be silent is the one who's heard the most. Justin immediately. A business coach met with a high-achieving client. The client was anxious, overwhelmed, running on fumes. She rattled off her concerns, deadlines, expectations, pressure, control. When she finally stopped, the coach didn't speak. Not immediately. He just looked at her. Present. Chapter 12. The Psychology of Instant Agreement. Sometimes a yes doesn't take time. Sometimes it happens in seconds. A glance. A sentence that bypasses the thinking mind and lands directly into the heart. That's what this chapter is about. Those moments when someone doesn't hesitate, doesn't negotiate, doesn't second guess. They just agree. And the question is, what creates that? What triggers instant agreement? It's not manipulation. It's not pressure. It's psychological alignment. A moment when what you say and what they feel snap together like puzzle pieces. It's not about saying more. It's about saying what's already true for them. Because when your words echo their own inner dialogue, the answer comes without resistance. That's when you stop trying to be convincing and start being clear. Let's begin with the core principle. Instant agreement happens when someone feels that saying yes is already who they are. Not who they're becoming, not what they should be, but who they already believe themselves to be, deep down. If you can speak to that identity, that value, that existing belief, you create something rare. Emotional congruence. The inside matches the outside. The heart matches the offer. The self matches the sentence. And the result? Yes. Without hesitation, without negotiation, without pushback. Here are the 4 psychological triggers that make that possible. 1. The "that's me" moment. This is when someone hears a phrase, a statement, or a story, and something inside them lights up. They don't even realize they're nodding. They just feel seen. Say you're talking to a creative entrepreneur. You don't pitch your idea like a sales strategy. You say, "You're the kind of person who doesn't just want to build something that sells. You want to build something that means something." That's not persuasion. That's recognition. And recognition builds instant rapport. It says, "I see you." And when people feel seen, they're far more likely to say yes, without thinking twice. 2. Familiarity equals safety. The brain loves what feels familiar. It equates familiarity with safety. And safety opens the door to agreement. So instead of introducing a brand new complicated idea, frame it as something they already know. Not, "This is a revolutionary new concept." Try, "This is something you've probably felt for a long time. We're just finally putting it into action." You've taken the unknown and made it known. You've turned threat into trust. And trust shortens the distance between hearing and agreeing. 3. People like us framing. We're social creatures, and we take cues from our tribe. If something is framed as normal, expected, or aligned with people we respect, our guard drops. So instead of, "You should do this," say, "Most people who value growth the way you do, they've already taken this step." You're not isolating them. You're inviting them into a group identity. And when people feel that saying yes affirms who they are socially, they move quickly. They want to belong. They want to stay consistent with who they've already claimed to be. That's not pressure. That's psychological integrity. 4. Reduce friction to 0. Sometimes people are ready to say yes emotionally, but logistically they stall. Too many steps. Too many unknowns, too many decisions. So make it easy, simple, effortless. Instead of saying, "Let me know if you want to move forward," say, "I can send you a quick link. It takes 30 seconds to get started." You've removed friction. You've made the yes feel like a step, not a leap. And when yes feels easy, yes comes fast. Let's ground this in a story. A coach was offering a new program to her email list. Most launches are long, multiple emails, webinars, calls. She did one differently. She sent a voice message, 1 minute long. She said, "If you've been waiting for permission to finally stop overthinking everything and build something your way, this is it. This is for people who don't want fluff. just results. Then silence, no hard pitch, no scarcity tactics, and in an hour, her calendar filled with signups. Why? Because she wasn't selling a program. She was speaking into a feeling they already had, a story they were already telling themselves. And her message gave that story permission to say yes. That's the essence of this chapter. You don't need to build belief from scratch. You need to align with what's already true. Because the fastest yes is the one that doesn't feel like a decision at all. It feels like a return, a remembering, a natural step. And when you create that feeling, you'll find people saying yes without blinking. Chapter 13, The Warmth of Certainty. Make them feel safe saying yes. People don't always say no because they disagree. Sometimes they say no because they're afraid. Not of you, not of your idea, but of the unknown. Because saying yes means change. Saying yes means risk. Saying yes means stepping off the ledge into something they can't fully control. And that's scary. So even when someone wants to say yes, they hesitate. They stall. They ask for more time. They disappear into silence. But here's what they're really waiting for. Certainty. Not certainty of outcome, but certainty of feeling. A calm inside, a knowing that says, this is safe. I'm not alone. I'll be okay. When people feel that warmth, they move. Not because you push them, but because you removed the fear. And that, more than anything else, is what turns hesitation into yes. Let's explore what certainty really means. We often mistake certainty for guarantees. But humans don't need a guarantee. They need something deeper. Emotional security. They need to trust you, trust the path, trust their own readiness. If even one of those is missing, their yes becomes shaky. But when all three align, agreement happens quickly, cleanly, quietly. Let's break this into 3 forms of certainty that create that shift. 1. Certainty of you. The first thing people ask, silently, instinctively, is, do I trust this person? Not their credentials, not their slides, them. Do they seem grounded? Do they believe what they're saying? Are they walking the same path they're inviting me onto? When you radiate calm belief, when your energy is clean, unhurried, real, people feel safe around you. Not impressed, safe. And safety is stronger than persuasion. If you want someone to say yes, your first job isn't to pitch. It's to be a person they can relax into. That means no over-explaining, no chasing energy, no compensating for your own doubt, just presence. When you believe, they believe. 2. Certainty of the path. Even when someone trusts you, they'll still ask, what happens next? Not just logistically, but emotionally. What will I feel? Will I be supported? Will this spiral out of control? So don't just describe the steps. Describe the experience. Let's say you're offering someone a new opportunity. Don't just say, you'll start Monday and receive a handbook. Say, Monday will feel like the first deep breath you've had in a while. You'll meet people who already believe in you. You'll be guided, supported, seen. You're not selling a plan. You're offering a feeling they can step into. And once they feel it, they'll want it. Because now the path isn't just clear, it's warm. Chapter 14. The Because Effect. Crafting Unquestionable Reasons. There's one word in the English language that holds quiet, extraordinary power. A word so simple, so overlooked, that most people never realize what it can do. That word is because. And when used with precision, it doesn't just inform, it disarms. It lowers resistance. It creates instant agreement. It gives people a reason to say yes before they even realize they've agreed. That's the because effect. And it works not because of logic, but because of how the mind processes reasons. Let's explore why this one word can shift the entire conversation without you ever needing to push. The human brain loves closure. Here's a simple truth. People need reasons to feel comfortable with their choices, even if the reasons are small. In the absence of a reason, the brain hesitates. It spins. It questions. But when you say because, you're telling the mind, there's a reason, you're safe to proceed. Even a flimsy reason is often enough. In fact, one of the most famous psychological studies ever done proved this. A researcher asked people in line at a copy machine, "Excuse me, can I use the copier?" Only 60% agreed. Then they tried, "Excuse me, may I use the copier because I'm in a rush?" 94% agreed. But here's what shocked everyone. When they said, "Excuse me, may I use the copier because I need to make copies?" That is, giving a reason that wasn't even new information, 93% still agreed. Why? Because the word because triggered an automatic reaction. This person has a reason. I can relax my resistance. It wasn't the content, it was the structure. And that's the key. Because creates permission. When you ask someone for something, their defenses go up. Even if you're sincere, even if it's simple, they start wondering, what does this cost me? What's their angle? Do I have enough information to decide? But when you follow your ask with because, you're saying, here's why this makes sense. Here's why you can trust me. It's not persuasion, it's relief. You're not demanding, you're justifying. And justification creates emotional closure. The best because is the one that resonates. Now, this doesn't mean any reason will do. The reason still needs to resonate. It needs to speak to their identity, their values, their current situation, their deeper emotions. Let's say you're asking someone to take on a new role. Don't just say, "I think you should do it because it's a good opportunity." That's surface level. Try, "I believe you're the right person because you already lead quietly in ways most people never notice." This role just puts a spotlight on what's already there. Now you've anchored the reason in identity. Now it's not just a task, it's a mirror. That kind of because doesn't force, it confirms. And people are drawn to anything that confirms who they believe they are. Avoid the because that creates pressure. There's a trap here. If you use because to guilt someone, you break trust. You should help me because I always help you. You need to agree because this is your responsibility. These reasons might work in the short term, but they damage long-term influence because they make the person feel cornered, not seen. The best reasons aren't guilt-driven. They're dignity-driven. They elevate. They empower. They say, "I see something in you, and this ask reflects that." That's the kind of reason that sticks, that feels right to say yes to. You can even let them fill in the because. Sometimes you don't even have to give the reason yourself. You just set up the frame and let them complete the thought. "I wanted to share this with you because..." and then pause. Let them imagine why. Let their own thoughts step into the silence. That space, when used wisely, becomes an invitation. And invitations, unlike instructions, create ownership. They're more persuasive because they feel more personal. Let's close with a true story. A man was trying to get his aging father to see a doctor. He'd tried everything. "Dad, you should go because your blood pressure is high. Because Mom's worried. Because it's dangerous not to." Nothing worked. Until one night, sitting beside his dad, he said, "Would you do it? Because it would help me sleep at night." His father looked at him, softened. "I didn't realize you were carrying that," he said. "I'll go." It wasn't about the doctor. It wasn't about the numbers. It was about the reason that mattered to the heart. And when that reason is present, yes becomes natural. So here's your reminder. If you're not getting a yes, ask yourself, am I giving a reason they actually feel? Am I anchoring it in something they believe? Or am I using because to create clarity or control? The best because doesn't make people submit. It makes them understand. And when people understand, they don't need more time. They just say yes. Chapter 15. Micro-commitments, massive results. People rarely leap. They edge forward, tiny step by tiny step, moment by moment, until suddenly they've crossed a line they didn't even realize they were approaching. That's the power of micro-commitments. Not grand gestures, not huge promises, but small, almost invisible moments of yes that lead to massive outcomes. You don't need people to say yes to the whole mountain. You just need them to say yes to the next step. Because when someone says yes once, they're far more likely to say yes again, and again, and again, until yes becomes natural, inevitable. That's how influence works, not by force, but by building momentum. Let's begin with the core idea. Big commitments feel risky. Small commitments feel safe. If you ask someone to sign a long-term contract, move cities, or change their habits overnight, their defenses rise. They freeze, they delay. But if you say, try this for a day, take 5 minutes and look at this. Let's just explore, no pressure. They relax. Because it's not all or nothing, it's something. And something is enough to start everything. Why micro-commitments work? Our brains love consistency. When we take an action, even a tiny one, we begin to align with that identity. We tell ourselves, I'm the kind of person who did that, so I guess this next step makes sense too. That's momentum psychology, and it's used everywhere. Free trials before subscriptions, just one push-up a day challenges. Download this free guide before being offered the full program. We're not being tricked, we're being led gently. And gentle leadership builds trust. The first yes is the most important, not the biggest yes, the first one. Because the first yes creates emotional investment. Even if it's small, liking a post, accepting a coffee, reading a few pages of your book, it opens a door. That door leads to attention. Attention leads to trust. Trust leads to transformation. Don't aim for the finish line. Aim for the first foot forward. Because once that foot moves, the body follows. Let me show you how to use this in everyday life. 1. Break the big ask into small steps. Imagine you want someone to join your project. Instead of saying, will you commit to 6 months and 12 deliverables? Try, would you be open to brainstorming ideas with me next week? That's a micro yes. It costs them little, but it builds psychological buy-in. They're already in motion, and once someone is moving, it feels natural to keep going. 2. Stack wins early. Once someone says yes, immediately follow with a second yes that builds their confidence. Let's say you ask a friend to come to a gym class. They say yes. As soon as it ends, say, you crush that. Want to try the Wednesday one too? You're not pushing, you're reinforcing. Momentum isn't built by luck. It's built by stacking successes. Every micro win compounds. Every micro agreement confirms. This is working. 3. Use phrases that invite light agreement. The language of micro-commitments sounds gentle, respectful, easy. Try phrases like, would it be crazy if? I'm just thinking out loud, what if? I don't need a yes, just a conversation. Want to play with the idea for a minute? These aren't sneaky, they're human. They honor autonomy. They say, "You're free. I'm not pulling, I'm just offering a path." And the moment someone steps onto that path, they begin writing a story that continues forward. Let's pause for a story. A young man wanted to propose to his girlfriend, but she was scared of commitment, burned before, hesitant. Instead of asking directly, he said one night, "Would it feel good to imagine growing old with someone you trust?" She smiled. "Yeah, that'd feel safe." Then he asked, "If we had one place that was just ours, no wedding, no plans, yet what would it look like?" They talked for hours. A month later, she brought up the idea of marriage first. Why? Because he gave her the space to walk herself toward yes, not by demanding, but by guiding. Step by step, micro-choice by micro-choice, until love caught up with courage. 4. Let them feel the progress. People don't just say yes because something is possible. They say yes because it feels like it's already happening. So after each micro-commitment, reflect it back. I love that we're already moving in this direction. This is the kind of shift that leads to real change. That first step says everything about where you're heading. Let them own their momentum, because people protect what they've started. They finish what they feel proud of, and that pride grows with each yes, no matter how small. Here's the truth. Massive change doesn't come from big leaps. It comes from small, repeated steps in the same direction. Influence isn't about dazzling. It's about nudging. It's about seeing the mountain and knowing how to lead someone to the first rock. Because once they step forward, they feel different. And when they feel different, they act differently, until one day they look back and realize, "I said yes, and now I've changed." All because of that first quiet step. Chapter 16. Stories that sell without selling. Facts inform. Stories transform. You can explain your idea for 10 minutes and get a polite nod, or tell a story for 1 minute and get a soul-level yes. Because when logic knocks, the mind answers. But when story whispers, the heart opens. If you want someone to say yes without pressure, you don't need to argue. You need to evoke. And nothing evokes like a story, not a list of benefits. A moment, a scene, a truth wrapped in a human experience. Because when someone sees themselves inside your story, they stop resisting. They stop judging. They just feel. And when they feel, they agree, without needing to be asked. Let's begin with the foundation. A great story doesn't tell someone what to think. It lets them feel what they already believe. That's the difference between convincing and connecting. Convincing is work. Connecting is weightless. And connection happens when the walls come down, when someone isn't being told what to do, but is being invited into something real. Why stories work on a psychological level? Stories bypass the critical mind. They engage empathy. When you share a story, the listener doesn't just understand it, they experience it. They feel the tension. They imagine the stakes. They anticipate the outcome. And in that process, your idea becomes their own. You've stopped selling. You've started transporting. And once someone is emotionally transported, agreement becomes effortless. The 3 elements of a story that sells without selling. You don't need to be a novelist. You just need 3 elements. 1, a relatable character. This doesn't have to be you. It can be a friend, a client, someone you knew, or even an imagined version of your listener. But they must feel real. Their struggle, their thoughts, their fears must sound like the voice in the listener's own head. Because when someone says, "That's me," they're already on the journey with you. 2, An emotional turning point. This is the shift. The moment everything cracked open. Not when they achieved the goal, but when they decided something had to change. Because that decision is what you want your listener to experience too. That moment of, I can't keep doing this. There has to be more. I'm ready. That moment is the yes. 3. A gentle resolution. Not a pitch, not a sale. Just what happened next. This is where you show, not tell, the result of the decision. And if you've done it right, the listener thinks, I want that, without you ever needing to ask. Let me show you with a story. A woman, let's call her Claire, used to walk into meetings and shrink. Not because she didn't have ideas, but because someone else always spoke louder. Then, one day, after watching her suggestion get claimed by someone else for the 3rd time, she walked out of the building and sat in her car. No music, no phone, just silence. And a sentence appeared in her mind. If I keep being quiet, no one will ever hear who I am. She didn't make a big change. She just started raising her hand once per meeting. One sentence, one idea, every time. 6 months later, she was leading a team. Not because she became louder, but because she stopped hiding. That story isn't selling a program. It's selling a possibility. It doesn't say, buy this course on leadership. It says, what if you stopped hiding? What might change? And when you give people a story that leads to that kind of question, you don't need to pitch them. They've already pitched themselves. Where to use stories? Anywhere someone is hesitating. Anywhere logic isn't landing. Anywhere you're trying to explain something and feel it falling flat. Instead of more words, try a story. Instead of, this product is effective, say, a woman told me she tried this after 10 other things failed. You could hear the hope back in her voice. Instead of, this tool saves time, say, one dad said it gave him an extra hour each night to read to his daughter again. That's what I think of every time I open the app. Stories aren't extras, they're emotional proof, and emotional proof always wins. The most powerful story is your own. Not the polished version, the real one. The moment you almost gave up. The decision that changed everything. The day you finally saw yourself clearly. People don't want you to be perfect. They want you to be witnessed. Because when you let them see your truth, without shame, without performance, you give them permission to say yes to theirs. Let's close with this. Selling is what happens when belief is already there, just waiting to be awakened. Don't convince, reveal. Don't pressure, paint. Let people see the version of themselves that your story brings to life. Let them feel the shift before the pitch. Because if your story speaks to their soul, you won't need to ask for the yes. It will already be there. Chapter 17. Turning resistance into curiosity. Every no has a story behind it. No one resists for no reason. Even when they seem cold, defensive, skeptical, uninterested, something is underneath. Fear, disappointment, mistrust, a past where yes led to pain. But here's the truth. Resistance isn't rejection, it's protection. And when you treat it like a wall to break through, you make it stronger. But when you treat it like a door, one that just needs a gentler knock, it begins to open. The key to that door is curiosity. Because curiosity doesn't threaten, it doesn't judge, it doesn't push. It invites. And when you invite someone to explore instead of agree, you create something rare. Safety inside the unknown. Let's begin with this question. What does resistance look like? Sometimes it's obvious. I don't think this is for me. That sounds risky. I just don't have time. Changing the subject. Saying maybe later. Smiling politely and withdrawing emotionally. But in both cases, the energy is the same. I'm not ready to trust this yet. So instead of fighting it, you turn toward it. And you ask, gently, what's coming up for you right now? If this feels off, I'd love to understand why. Would it help to walk through it together without pressure? You're not trying to win, you're trying to see. And that changes everything. The power of empathetic curiosity. When you meet resistance with empathy instead of urgency, you invite someone to stay in the conversation. You're saying, you don't have to say yes, but let's stay curious together. This breaks the pattern. Most people expect you to argue, to defend, to convince. But when you lean in softly, when you honor their hesitation, you disarm the fear. Because now they're not being cornered, they're being heard. And the moment Sunyun feels heard, the wall cracks. And through that crack, curiosity grows. How to invite curiosity in moments of resistance. 1. Name the resistance without judgment. Instead of avoiding the tension, call it gently. I can feel there's some hesitation. Totally okay. You're not the first person to feel this way. Sometimes resistance means we're closer than we think. Naming it normalizes it. It removes shame. And shame is what keeps people locked in their no. 2. Ask open, neutral questions. You're not digging for ammo. You're exploring together. Try questions like, what would have to feel different for this to feel like a yes? When you think of saying yes, what part feels most uncertain? What's the story your mind is telling you right now? These aren't traps, they're mirrors. You're helping them see what's behind the no, without forcing it away. 3. Share a parallel story. Instead of saying, I understand, show them. Tell a story of someone who resisted just like they are and what helped shift it. Not to manipulate, but to make them feel less alone. Example, I remember someone else saying, I'm not ready for this, and later realizing it wasn't the offer, it was the pressure they put on themselves. Once they gave themselves permission to take it at their own pace, everything changed. Now you've created permission, and permission breeds possibility. Let me offer you a moment from real life. A man was trying to help his teenage daughter open up. Every time he asked how she was doing, she shut down. One night, instead of asking her anything, he said, if I were you, I might be tired of people asking how I'm feeling all the time. She looked at him. Yeah, she said. It makes me feel like something's wrong with me. Silence. Then she started talking, and kept talking. Because he didn't push, he joined her on the other side of the wall. That's what curiosity does. It walks around the defenses, sits down beside the fear, and says, tell me your story. I'm not here to fix you, just to hear you. Resistance is not the end. It's the beginning. It means there's something important here, something personal. So if someone resists, don't ask, how do I get around this? Ask, what are they protecting? And then hold space for that answer. Because when resistance is met with respect, it softens. And when it softens, people become willing to take a second look. And sometimes, that second look becomes the first real yes. Let's close this chapter with one truth. You don't have to crush resistance. You have to understand it. And the bridge from resistance to agreement is not pressure, it's presence. So breathe, stay soft, get curious, and watch how even the firmest no can melt into the beginning of maybe. And from there, yes is just one safe breath away. Chapter 18, The Rhythm of Influence, Timing Your Words. Influence isn't just about what you say, it's about when you say it. A powerful sentence said too early feels intrusive. A perfect offer made too late feels irrelevant. But when you say the right thing at the right moment, it lands like lightning. That's the rhythm of influence. Because yes doesn't always depend on the message received. The space, the timing, the readiness. And when you learn to move with that rhythm, you no longer force agreement, you flow into it. Let's start here. Words carry different weight depending on when they arrive. The same phrase can feel comforting or condescending, supportive or suffocating, depending on the emotional timing. So to influence well, you must become not just a speaker, but a listener of moments. You must feel not only the person in front of you, but the energy between you. Because influence has rhythm, and rhythm begins with presence. The cost of poor timing. Have you ever made a great suggestion only to watch it fall flat? Or offered someone help and they brushed you off? Or shared an insight only to be ignored, then heard later when someone else said it? It wasn't your words, it was the timing. They weren't ready. The space wasn't right. The rhythm was off. And that's not a failure. It's a cue to slow down, to observe, to wait. Because sometimes the most influential thing you can do is pause. The 3 rhythms that make influence land. Let's walk through 3 rhythms to tune into when you want your words to truly land. 1. The emotional rhythm. This is the internal climate of the person you're speaking to. Are they open or guarded, calm or reactive? If someone is anxious, distracted, or resistant, your message, no matter how kind or clear, will feel like pressure. So wait for the emotional window. You'll feel it. When they exhale for the first time, when their shoulders drop, when their eyes soften, when silence enters the space. That's when the door opens, not before. 2. The conversational rhythm. Every conversation has its own pulse. It speeds up, slows down, takes detours. And if you interrupt that rhythm with an agenda, you create friction. But if you join the rhythm, your words slide in naturally. Let someone finish their thought. Let their emotion peak before you respond. Match the tone, the energy, the pace. Because when you match rhythm, you match trust. And trust makes the yes come quicker. 3. The story rhythm. Every person is on their own internal timeline. They may be in the middle of a chapter you can't see. And if you try to rush them into a new one, they'll push back. So pay attention. Don't say, here's the solution when they're still in the pain. Don't say, it's going to be okay before they've admitted that it's not. Let the story unfold. Let them arrive at the turning point naturally. And when they do, your words won't feel like persuasion. They'll feel like a response to a readiness they just discovered. Let me share a real moment. A man was trying to help his brother quit drinking. He had all the facts, all the fears, all the reasons, but nothing worked. Then one night, sitting on the back porch, his brother said, "You ever feel like you're disappointing people without even trying?" Silence. And in that exact moment, not earlier, not later, he said, "I think you're just tired of carrying something you were never meant to carry alone." That was it. His brother looked at him and nodded. No argument, no lecture, just timing, just rhythm, just readiness. How to practice rhythmic influence. You don't need a script, you need attunement. Try this. Before speaking, ask, what's the emotional weather right now? Before making a request, ask, are they open or closed? Do they feel seen or just spoken to? And when in doubt, wait. Because influence is like music. The space between the notes is what creates the song. Words land when energy aligns. That's the secret. It's not your logic, not your delivery, not your credentials. It's your timing. Because when energy aligns, resistance disappears. When rhythm is right, truth lands softly. And when readiness is honored, yes comes willingly. Let's close with this. Influence isn't just what you say. It's when your words meet someone's unspoken need. And that doesn't happen in haste. It happens in rhythm. So breathe, feel, wait. And when the moment opens, step into it. With presence, with gentleness, with timing that lets your message bloom. That's when you'll hear the yes. And you won't have to ask twice. Chapter 19. Influence without authority. Leading when you're not in charge. You don't need a title to lead. You don't need permission to persuade. And you definitely don't need authority to earn agreement. Because the most powerful kind of influence, the kind that makes people say yes without hesitation, doesn't come from your position. It comes from your presence. Influence is not about control. It's about credibility. It's about the trust people place in you before they even know they're placing it. You can walk into a room where no one reports to you, no one answers to you, no one has to follow your lead, and still, they do. Not because they're told to, but because they want to. That's influence without authority, and it's one of the most valuable skills you'll ever learn. Let's begin here. People don't follow power. They follow alignment. When your energy feels stable, when your words feel safe, you become someone others look to. Not because you force the moment, but because you've earned it. In every group, every family, every workplace, there are official leaders, and there are real leaders. The ones who hold the room when others speak, the ones people check in with before making a decision, the ones whose opinion shapes the emotional temperature without ever raising their voice. That can be you, without a title, without permission, without power, just presence. The three foundations of influence without authority. You don't need control. You need trust, clarity, and consistency. Let's break them down. 1. Trust, the quiet currency. Before anyone follows you, they ask, not out loud, but emotionally, can I trust this person with my vulnerability? If the answer is yes, you don't need authority, because trust is authority. How do you build it? Show up consistently. Listen more than you talk. Keep small promises. Be emotionally predictable. Honor people's concerns without brushing them aside. Do this often enough, and people will start bringing their decisions to you, even when you're not the one in charge. Because safety, not status, drives trust, and trust drives yes. 2. Clarity, the calm in the chaos. In uncertain moments, people look for clarity, not commands. If you can name the confusion without panicking, if you can speak clearly when others are spinning, if you can simplify what feels overwhelming, you become the guide. You're not forcing a path. You're lighting it. You're not barking orders. You're saying, this is where we are. This is what matters most. This is what I see. And because clarity creates calm, people follow you, not out of obligation, but out of relief. 3. Consistency, the anchor people grab onto. Unpredictable people are exhausting, but consistent people, they're magnetic. When your energy doesn't spike or crash with the room, when you respond instead of react, when you show up the same regardless of who's watching, you become someone people trust to stay steady. And in that steadiness, your influence grows, because people aren't just looking for brilliance, they're looking for ground. Be the ground. Let me offer you a story. A junior designer worked on a team of loud voices and sharp egos. She had no authority, no title, no vote. But whenever the team got stuck, she was the one who said, "Let's step back. What's the real problem here?" She never told people what to do. She just asked the right questions. She spoke with calm. She offered perspective without ego. And slowly, people started listening. By the end of the quarter, the creative director said, "I want her in every meeting. She brings clarity." That's influence without authority. Earned, not assigned. How to lead without being the leader. Here are a few practices that create natural influence. Be the emotional thermostat. Don't just reflect the energy, regulate it. Ask more than you assert. Let people hear their own answers through your curiosity. Speak last, but summarize clearly. Show that you are listening. People value that more than speaking early. Validate emotions, not just opinions. It makes sense that this is frustrating, lands better than "here's what we should do." Stay consistent when others wobble. Calm people are rare. That rarity is your power. You don't need a title to lead. You don't need a platform to be powerful. You just need to be grounded, clear, trustworthy, emotionally present. When you embody that, people say yes because they want to, not because they were told to, not because they were forced, but because your presence makes yes feel inevitable. Let's close this chapter with a final truth. True influence doesn't come from being in charge. It comes from being in tune. With people, with emotion, with timing, with the quiet cues most miss. So lead from where you are. Speak when it matters. Anchor the space and watch how others start looking to you, not for orders. And once they feel aligned with you, they'll say yes without even realizing it. Chapter 20. Yes is a journey, not a demand. In the beginning, you might have thought getting to yes was about pressure, about persuasion, about saying the right words at the right time in the right way. But now you know the truth. Yes isn't a moment you force, it's a journey you guide. And the people who are most influential, the ones who get yes without asking twice, are not the loudest. They're not the most charismatic. They're not the most aggressive. They're the ones who walk with you, not ahead of you, who listen before they speak, who understand before they act, who care more about alignment than achievement, because they've discovered something powerful. The most lasting yes is the one someone chooses for themselves. Let's look at what that journey really is. It starts long before the decision. It starts with presence, with empathy, with curiosity. It builds through stories, timing, silence, and rhythm. It softens resistance through safety. It opens space through emotional clarity. And somewhere along the way, quietly, naturally, the yes begins to take shape. You don't see it happen. You feel it. A shift in posture, a breath, a glance. A where there used to be no. That's not agreement. That's movement. It's the path to transformation. Stop chasing the destination. Too many people try to shortcut the journey. They push, they corner, they demand the yes before the soil is ready. And in doing so, they damage what could have blossomed. You can't rush someone's readiness. You can only walk with them toward it. So stop chasing the yes like it's a prize. Instead, ask better questions. Be patient with silence. Share your truth gently. Let the emotional door open on its own. Because when you stop demanding answers, people start discovering them. Influence that lasts. A yes that's coerced can be reversed. A yes that's forced can fracture. But a yes that's earned through trust, timing, empathy, and resonance lasts. Because it wasn't taken, it was offered. That kind of yes sticks. It weathers doubt. It carries commitment. Because it didn't come from pressure. It came from within. The journey you've walked. By now, you've learned how to read people before they speak. Say less and mean more. Trigger agreement through rhythm and story. Transform resistance into curiosity. Lead without a title. Give without overgiving. Asking without asking. And speak in a way that feels inevitable, not invasive. You've learned that language is powerful, but only when it's aligned with intention. That trust is influence's true currency. That silence is often stronger than strategy. And that how you make someone feel will always matter more than what you offer. So as you go forward, into conversations, meetings, relationships, decisions, remember this. Yes is not a prize to win. It's a moment to receive when the soil is ready. Your job is not to command. It's to create conditions. Your job is not to push. It's to connect. Then when you connect deeply enough, gently enough, honestly enough, you'll hear the yes. Not because you forced it, but because you never had to ask twice. Thank you for walking this journey. If this book shifted something in you, if it helped you hear yourself more clearly, if it planted something true in your heart, don't let it end here. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more stories, tools, and lessons like these. Stories that don't just teach, they transform. Because this isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new way to speak, to listen, to lead, to influence. One quiet, powerful human yes at a time.